Good evening, viewers. Welcome to Ask Why, the program organized, as you know, by the Catholic Commission for Social Justice. And this evening we'll be discussing the Pope's peace message for the 50th World Day of Peace on the theme, Nonviolence, a style of politics for peace. And after the program, you can visit CCSJ website, CCSJ Trinidad, just Google that, and you will find our newsletter, parish link on the Pope's peace message. But to help us discuss this, this peace message, I've got with me a distinguished panel. To my left, I've got Nadine Bushell, as you know, who is a member of CCSJ, and we also congratulate her as the District Governor of Alliance International District 60A for Trinidad and Tobago, Guyana, and Suriname. So congratulations, Nadine. And to her left, we've got Nicole Gomes, who is a member of the Franciscan Institute, a teacher at St. Mary's College, and she's worked on conflict resolution for quite a number of years. So welcome, Nicole.
Thank you.
And to her left is my good pal, Dr. Terence Farrell, who is the chair of CREDI and an economist, and in fact has been doing work on helping Trinidad, giving advice to the government on how to help create a non-violent society. So welcome, Terry.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so we'll just break first of all for some of the quotations from the Pope's peace message. Before we do that, though, I just remind you that it was in 1968 that Pope Paul VI initiated this World Day of Peace, and he rightly said that the world must be educated to love peace, to build it up, and to defend it. And all the years since 1968, our popes each year has issued this peace message. So let's hear from our own Pope Francis about some of the quotations contained in this year's message.
I ask God to help all of us to cultivate nonviolence in our most personal thoughts and values. May charity and nonviolence govern how we treat each other as individuals, within society, and in international life. When victims of violence are able to resist the temptation to retaliate, they become the most credible promoters of nonviolent peacemaking. In the most local and ordinary situations, and in international order, may nonviolence become the hallmark of our decisions, our relationships and our actions, and indeed of political life in all its forms.
Today, sadly, we find ourselves engaged in a horrifying world war fought piecemeal. We know that this piecemeal violence of different kinds and levels causes great suffering. Violence is not the cure for our broken world. Countering violence with violence leads at best to forced migrations and enormous suffering, because vast amounts of resources are diverted to military ends and away from the everyday needs of young people, families experiencing hardship, the elderly, the infirm, and the great majority of people in our world. At worst, it can lead to death, physical and spiritual, of many people, if not of all.
Jesus himself lived in violent times, yet he taught that the true battlefield, where violence and peace meet, is the human heart. For it is from within, from the human heart, that evil intentions come. But Christ's message in this regard offers a radically positive approach. He unfailingly preached God's unconditional love, which welcomes and forgives. To be true followers of Jesus today also includes embracing his teaching about nonviolence.
If violence has its source in the human heart, then it is fundamental that nonviolence be practiced before all else within families. The politics of nonviolence have to begin in the home and then spread to the entire human family. Saint Therese of Lisieux invites us to practice the little way of love, not to miss out on a kind word, a smile, or any small gesture which sows peace and friendship. An integral ecology is also made up of simple daily gestures that break with the logic of violence, exploitation, and selfishness.
Excellent quotations from that document, and I urge you to read the entire document. But you know, on panel, one of the things that struck me was that Pope Francis rightly went to the heart. They said that at the heart of the problem is the human heart. But how do we change the human heart? He rightly refers us to the family, that we have to get things right in our families. You want to comment on that?
Well, actually, when I saw that quote, I loved it because one of the things we have to realize is that always within us there's going to be that contradiction. So the good and the evil is constantly fighting with us. And part of living a nonviolent life, I think, is being very, very aware of yourself and aware of your values and the choices you've made to live a nonviolent life. Mm-hmm. So that's important because it's a way we grow. Yeah. It's a way of life. It's not that we're either good or bad.
Yes.
So
it's every day. There's a campaign for nonviolence at Texas, Kansas State University, where they said we learn to practice nonviolence one step at a time, one choice at a time, as you say about choices, and one day at a time. Terry, your views on that?
Well, I think we have to look at, in terms of our society. I think Trinidad and Tobago society, I think West Indian society, our societies were actually born in violence. Yes. They started with exploitation, with the genocide of native populations and so on. And I think when we look at sort of our social and cultural history as a people, what we see is the use of violence almost at every stage, at every step of the process, from sort of the colonial governors and the colonial office and so on, and that came down into our families and into our communities, so that I think historically the first resort of parents, unfortunately, the first resort of teachers in our schools, and many of us, I think, growing up and so on, experienced that. The first resort was a violent response, was that of giving licks. And we were taught that licks was good for you and so on. And I think that then became ingrained in our psyche, in our culture, so that the responses that we developed as people were responses to violence being inflicted on us, and therefore our violence also became, we tended to be violent in turn. So to address the problem, as Pope Francis quite rightly says, you have to go back to the family, which is the source of the community, which then becomes the source for the society as a whole, and to begin to change that there. So it has to change in the family, it has to change in the schools, and then spread out, I think, to the rest of the society.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, Nadine, do you want to ask Sharon?
As I was listening to Dr. Farrell, I thought of the carrot and stick. And that is how we train ourselves. If you behave well, you get a carrot. If you don't behave well, you get a stick. If you don't perform well in school, something is wrong with you, you get a stick, not a carrot. And that has to do with parenting. And many young persons or many persons make children and are not really truly concerned about their well-being and what, I shouldn't say not concerned about their well-being, but what is required to ensure that their children are well brought up in terms of your environment at home. A clean and tidy house, like they say, cleanliness is next to godliness. You have your home in disarray, even how you speak to your children. Sometimes when you're not speaking to them, you speak to them one way, but they're listening to you in other conversations outside. And when when Dr. Farrell spoke about our society and the history, because we are taught in order for us to get, we have to disadvantage somebody else, or we have to get at the expense of somebody else. We all can't grow together. We all can't do things together.
Crab in
So
a barrel.
yes, it's really about a
barrel.
mindset in terms of it is possible for everyone to do well, sharing the resources that are available. And I think that is the issue. We are competing with each other for no reason at times, because we all want to get ahead by any means necessary.
Yes, and in fact, the society perpetuate that with the kind of exams and the, the top 100 or top 200 who's going to get president. So it's always a competition. There's the little story about the European woman who went to Africa and told the children, right, we're going to have a race. First, second, and third, and she couldn't understand why they were all holding hands to run, because their culture was that we're all going together, we're journeying forward together. So really, it's a mindset, as you say. It's a cultural thing that we have to address as well, in terms of how we change from a violent mindset, recognizing our history of slavery, of indentureship, of master
That's right.
whipping you and all that. That, sadly, some people say we mustn't go back to slavery, but that is our history.
Yes.
And that has impacted on how we treat other people as well.
Correct.
So there's no way we could ignore that.
No.
But the Pope is saying, he's calling us to have a deeper understanding and a broader commitment to Jesus' way of active nonviolence. Quite often people say, well, Jesus was violent. But remember when Peter cut off the centurions and he said, put back your sword in its sheath. When they wanted to stone the woman in adultery, he stopped them. So non-violence, a clear example throughout the scriptures of Jesus being non-violent. And if we're followers of Jesus, he said in his peace message, then we have to embrace non-violence. Yeah? We need to break now for a video clip, Make Me an Instrument of Peace. Very powerful images there, showing us, in fact, around the world at the moment, there are over 50 countries in which there's armed conflict. We are warmongers as a world, and that is why each of us has to play our part to build a better, a just peace. I think it's important to share with viewers too the origins of Pope Francis's choice of his theme. In April last year, there was in Rome, there was a conference entitled Nonviolence and Just Peace, 11th to the 13th of April, and there was a statement that you can access online, an appeal to the Catholic Church to recommit to the centrality of gospel of nonviolence. And that statement was issued, about 80 people gathered together from around the world, and they issued this statement, which was shared with the Holy Father, who then decided, obviously, to take it further and to issue this statement. And what he's done also is, I don't know if it's as a result of that conference, but he has merged 4 key dicasteries, they call them, departments, to be led now by Cardinal Turkson, who was the head of the Pontifical Council for Justice and Peace. He has now, he's now heading from the 1st of January a dicastery for the promotion of integral human development. So it's a combination of these 4, Pontifical Council for Justice and Peace, the Pontifical Council Cor Unum, that's One Heart, the Pontifical Council for the Pastoral Care of Migrants and Itinerant People, and the Pontifical Council for Healthcare Workers. So these 4 areas, and why he's done that, he said, is we have to have a coordination of those dealing with, in relation to migrants, the need of the sick, the excluded, the marginalized, the imprisoned, the unemployed, victims of armed conflict, natural disasters, all forms of slavery and torture. So this new dicastery is a super dicastery. Yeah? But in looking at international issues, let's go back now to look at how can we, in our own little ways in Trinidad and Tobago, how can we start building peace in our own small way as individuals, within our homes, in our schools, in our workplaces? Give some practical examples now of ways, Nicole, that we can do this.
I think, first of all, it has to be a very, as I keep saying, a very conscious choice, that we are not going to respond with violence, that we will have to take the time and effort to find an alternative response. I think families praying together, families eating together, simple things like that, where you're communicating with each other. The children are left alone a lot.
Right.
And they're left alone with television shows that are very violent. And so they think that, I think sometimes they feel that's just how it is. I think being contemplative is very important as well, because if you don't go within yourself, you're not going to connect with the strength that you're going to need to deal with violent situations. How do I respond to somebody who is angry and attacking me? Yeah. I have to be very conscious that I'm not going to react. So to me, it's the choice that I'm not doing this, and therefore, what are my alternatives? Okay. How do I speak to people? How do I, what are the things that we do together as a family to build? I think an important thing in the society is family life important? And if family life is important, then why is everyone working on a Saturday, on a Sunday? How can we have family life if mothers are not at home on weekends? So that gets us into the economy and into money. Yeah. And that is
a good idea.
How we use the resources of the nation to build peace.
Yes, I mean, obviously, the more unequal the society is, and one of the things that we've seen over the course of the last couple of decades, I think, with globalization and so on, is that inequality globally has increased, meaning that the disparities between the richer countries and the poorer countries has in fact widened, and then also within countries, so that even within the rich countries, so that even the United States, for example, and so on, we see a widening inequality. That in itself leads to a certain amount of resentment. It leads to anger, and so on. And then some of the other things. I mean, I think Nicole talked about the family and what we need to be doing there in terms of our communities, because our communities now are communities that are more diverse. I mean, one of the good things about Trinidad is that we've always had very diverse communities. So we've grown up in situations where we see people of different ethnicities and so on. If you look at Europe now, the migrant crisis in Europe has now created a number of tensions and strains and so on, because the migrants are people of different ethnicity, they're Muslims, they're from different countries. People have all kinds of prejudices against people who don't look like them, who don't pray like them, and so on. And then that then leads to a certain kind of reaction, which can then lead to violence against people and so on. So it really is a problem that is as wide as it is broad. It's at the level of the families, at the level of the community, at the level of the society as a whole. And we have to therefore, Nicole is talking about addressing the problem at the level of the family. At the level of the community, it's about trying to figure out ways of how we overcome prejudice, how we overcome ethnic prejudice, how we overcome other forms of prejudice and division and so on in our society.
And also there are lots of gender issues as well.
Absolutely.
You know, when I look at the poor 21-year-old girl who was just killed in today's paper. Maybe.
For me, a number of issues come to the fore. One for me is how do we disarm persons? Because I'm a Trinidadian, and you're talking about a politics of nonviolence, but we are at the 24th of January, and we are close to twice the number of murders, almost 40 murders for the year. So how do you tell me as a citizen to have a politics of nonviolence? Why are our young men in particular behaving that way? We brought up the issue of gender. And sometimes for us, in terms of economic inequality, persons feel that they are disadvantaged in the society, so they react that way. So for me, it's difficult sometimes to think, how do I treat with my society? I can decide, which a number of us have done, to have electronic gates, make the wall higher, put in security systems. And as time progresses, people are able to infiltrate those things. So the walls get higher, the systems get more sophisticated, but the society is not getting better. And we as individuals are running a lot of times from the problem. And in terms of our responsibility for each other, I think we have to go back to that. And we ourselves, some of us are employers, even though we work for persons, we also employ persons. How do we pay the persons that work for us, the person who comes to clean our yard? How do we treat persons when they're passing in the street? Do we say good morning? Do we smile at them? Because some persons have problems and nobody, you don't even care about it. Sometimes you go to church as a Catholic, and I will admit sometimes you feel as if you're alone in a crowd because you have the sign of peace and they barely want to shake your hand. And when you enter into a new community, they make you know that you're not an original member of the community. And all of these things create exclusion. And I wanted to talk about the issue of the migrants. Now, I know that countries have concerns about persons infiltrating and utilizing their resources and perhaps denying them. But if you think of how some of those persons reach to those societies, they are willing to go on a boat, risk their lives, which means that they are running from violent situations. And sometimes we forget that, and when we think they're just coming to take over our space. So it's a lot about not having an appreciation for what other persons are going through.
Lack of respect.
Yes, a lack of mutual respect and understanding.
Yes, and one of the things that we need, if we're talking about our youth, young men in particular being violent, in a country where, how can we promote nonviolence when we have a proliferation of drugs and guns? So there are wider issues that a society has to face up to if it wants to promote nonviolence. You have to create an environment in which nonviolence can flourish.
Yes.
And it cannot flourish. The chair of the CCJ said that at a conference last year, that crime will flourish in an environment that encourages it. And when you have it, so easy to get drug outside two police stations now, just go and shoot up everybody, how can we promote violence? And simple little things, we'll open up the lines in a while so that you can call in to give examples of how you've been practicing nonviolence. The Pope is saying each of us in our own little way can practice nonviolence. And that campaign for nonviolence I referred to gave 64 ways to practice nonviolence. Simple little things like making sure that you don't gossip. The Pope is on about not gossiping, and some of our priests in Trinidad Gossip is a very violent thing. Whether it's true or not, you can create a lot of violence by just gossiping.
Mauvais langue.
Mauvais langue, as we call
Yeah.
it here,
Yeah.
you know. And there's so many people going through our society with horrible traumatic experiences. You know, Maya Angelou she was talking about turning her traumatic experiences to in a creative way. What did she learn from those in her childhood that she couldn't help because that was her experience? How can she turn that around to build herself as a non-violent person? So we need to help people who are experiencing trauma to turn that around, not to want revenge. You know, after that shooting and the 2 people died at St. Joseph Police Station, there's graffiti on the wall, you get a feeling there'll be gang warfare now, they're coming out for revenge. How do we do that in our own homes, not to seek revenge, not to gossip, and to take responsibility for our own actions? Yeah? Terry, do you want to talk a little bit too about, as an educator, as a chair of CREDI, what do you think teachers can do in schools to help build that peace?
Well, I think every teacher, and I mean, I'm not been an active teacher in the classroom. I mean, I was at university, so those things don't happen at university. But I think within the classroom, I mean, it's very natural, I think, for children to get into situations of conflict and so on. And the question is, what does the teacher do when they observe that and so on? It's about intervening at that point and then using that as a way of coaching and teaching these young children the right way of dealing with conflict situations. At the adult level, when we come to adults, I mean, we have in Trinidad the whole mediation thing which is started. Now, I'm a certified mediator myself. There are a large number of mediators who have been trained in Trinidad and Tobago over the course of the last several years who are designated as sort of peacemakers, teaching people how to resolve conflict in a way that is win-win, so to speak, for both parties, rather than going to court and becoming adversarial and so on. Which is a kind of violence in its own kind of way, because it's about I win and you lose. Rather, mediation sort of brings people together, put interests on the table, determine ways determine a resolution that both parties can benefit.
And you know, the whole issue of how we behave ourselves, you know, you see somebody give you a bad drive, so you go cuss them and get on.
Road rage.
Somebody standing there at the pedestrian crossing you and stopping, you're just going. Those are violent acts. Be more courteous. Those are some of the ideas coming out of this Kansas State University program campaign. Can't we be courteous? Can't you stop? Sometimes your foot on the pedestrian crossing and nearly run it over. You know, we have to be more, and that's all part of it. We're angry, we're in a hurry, and we're not thinking about being courteous. Respect for the dignity of each human being. If we did that more from our Catholic social teaching, we know that the world will be a better place. Nadine, you wanted to come in?
I was just thinking of our environment and who are the persons or institutions that constitute the environment, and each of us have responsibility. We talk about global conflicts, and then we have agencies like a number of UN agencies, UNICEF, UN, that deals with violence against children, those who deal with war crimes. So those institutions in itself, they have a role to play in terms of the global systems and some national issues. We have our government and our politicians. We have the issue of legislation. We have the issue of politicians' behavior on a political platform, things that they say and do to incite their supporters to follow them. You know, so there's some level of responsibility there as well. Then you have NGOs and civil society organizations who have a role to play in supporting the government and what they do, and they are supposed to be on the ground, and they also can help in terms of education programs for young persons, providing some of the basic social needs that persons don't have. Then you have the private sector. It's not only about making money and exploiting persons, it's about also filling the gap where the government or NGOs cannot do so. And then you have us as private citizens. So if these different arms of the society really take responsibility and try to work towards a common good, we'll really have much less of a problem. And we as individuals have to take responsibility for ourselves and our actions in terms of our courtesy, in terms of, we talk about economics, we know in order for us to survive, we must produce. So some of us want to get paid, but do not want to put in the required amount of work to produce something to make the country a better place. When we don't produce, we are denying our country. And then we talk about poor services and bad roads, you're cussing the government because they have potholes in the road and those things. I mean, not understanding the link between the violence and the way that we behave as individuals. So again, the home and the school and the church has some responsibility in terms of dealing with the mindset and the culture of persons.
Okay, we got a call. Good evening. Good evening, caller.
Hello, good evening to you.
Good evening.
I just tuned in. And I'm so happy that I tuned into the station, and I'm not looking at the other shows that I usually look at. How regular do you have this?
Once a month. Ask Why is once a month.
Oh, that is so sad. That is so sad because these this topic is very important. You know, I was an acolyte many years ago at Christ the Lord Church in Marvella, at Marvella. And, you know, I'll be 55 next month. And I have seen Trinidad and Tobago, as many people my age have seen this place just go haywire just over a period of decades. It's very sad, you know. But one of the things that I look at is the fact that God, because we need to go back to basics with everything that we do. God, in his infinite wisdom, knew that unlimited freedom could lead to disaster. So he put rules in place. And we have become a society that have become, that are afraid to stand up for that which is right, because everyone has rights. Everyone seems to think that they have rights. And there are people who are learned people who, you know, who are there to make money that are willing to defend whatever rights that people think that they have. So the society within itself. Violence is the topic, but, you know, someone was speaking about, I think, someone was speaking about the guns, you know, all these guns and the drugs. But if, I'll just bring it, you know, up to date. If a nation's borders remains unprotected for 1 day, no, 1 day is 24 hours. But let's say for 24 hours, one nation's borders remains unprotected. It means that every man, woman, and child has become vulnerable to criminal activity for 24 hours. We have a nation there here that had been unprotected for 5 years. So a lot of things took place right under our noses, and we sort of rock back. You know, we have first world countries that, you know, the people would come out and demand certain things, and somehow we have become a quiet nation. Someone spoke about the shows on TV. We have allowed people to show stuff on TV without demanding that it be stopped. When I look at these the shows on TV now, there's blatant pornography, but then someone has rights to show that. You know, there's blatant disrespect for adults, and then they have them in the comedies, and then they play this laughing thing, you know, in the background. So that becomes acceptable to our children, because that is the society that we have allowed. Everything that we are seeing here, we as people who say, well, okay, we stand for God, and we say, well, okay, we want to be like Jesus. Sometimes I believe we are further from him than ever, because he would have been a person that would stand up against this sort of nonsense. And we have everyone, as I said, everyone believes that they have rights to do this and rights to that. Somehow we need to stand up, because the few people who are willing to stand up in this society, we get them fired. We get them fired because they have no right to speak about other people's rights. So somehow this is a runaway horse. Yeah. And someone spoke about the politics. That is one of our greatest worry, because if people feel disenfranchised, they are not going to wake up in the morning and while they're walking through Port of Spain or anywhere for that matter, get bounced on the shoulder and they're tummy hungry because they were marginalized because of their race or religion or whatever, and they're going to be just happy about it. Let's be factual about that, right? A hungry man is an angry man. So there's so many ills, and I really wish that this program could be on regularly and people can get more involved, because programs like these need sponsorship. Programs like these because this is what we need in this country for people to get, more and more involved. I know that people are waiting to call in. So that was my piece, and I really hope to see more of this show. Right, so you all take care.
Thank you for calling in. And when you're talking about, we say we follow Jesus, one of the things the Pope says, and he makes it clear in this peace message, it's not only for Catholics, it's for all people of all religious traditions. Because as he says, faith and violence are incompatible. You cannot say you're a person of faith, whatever faith community you belong to, and no faith community I know really, traditional faith community, promotes violence. So he's rightly saying that non-violent peacemaking is a virtue, and Jesus calls us to develop this and to embrace his teaching of non-violence. Yeah, I think we need to. Yeah, well, we'll continue, and remember, callers, you can call in now, but I want to engage in talking about ways in which we can try to help our young people to not to choose violence, but to choose, there's a person, I won't name the person, whenever I get angry, I remember she said, just say praise God. A simple thing like that, and it calms you down. There must be some Catholic mantra or something that we can help our youngsters count to 10. When you look at some of the video clips on social media with our kids just fighting each other in schools and in the streets, etc. What have you been, Nicole, involved in conflict resolution? What are some of the strategies you think we can share with viewers?
Well, actually, when I was listening to the gentleman just now, the Franciscan Institute, we do peace workshops from Pachi Beni. Right. And they've done, it's an engaged program, so any organization, whether it's young people, whether it's a school, whether it's a family, they can get in touch with the Franciscan Institute, and we can arrange to do workshops. We do in communities, in churches, so that there are options there that people can help you work through things. I think some of the young people are so caught in the violence that they live, that they think is what life is, that they need a lot of work, and there is going to be a need for a lot of dialogue and a lot of talking to, because their go-to default is violence.
Yes.
So we do need to do workshops with them and show them actual skills as to this is how we can communicate.
Right. Terry, when you think of the need for mentors and role models, as people who would help build peace, what are some of the ideas you have to call out our people out there who can be mentors? Too often in society, we move up and not many want to plow back something.
Yes, that is true. Yes, and so therefore there is a need for a lot more mentoring. I think particularly because within the school system, our teachers themselves need training, and they need specialist training, I think, in terms of dealing with conflicts and so on among these children, how to manage that and what they should impart. As the caller was saying, all of the things that we see on television and in movies and so on, we need to ensure that we also have alternative representations of people. So I was just thinking, for example, of somebody like Nelson Mandela, and what do people know about his life and how he responded to violence, his 27 years of captivity, coming out from that situation, becoming president of South Africa, and his Truth and Reconciliation initiative, not revenge, not taking revenge on the white population, but rather reaching out and building bridges and so on.
Okay, we'll continue. Yes, excellent example. But we got a caller. Good evening, caller.
Hello?
Good evening.
Hello?
Yes, good evening. We're hearing you.
Yes?
Yes. Can you share with us? You have something to share with us?
Yes, I'm here with you.
Okay. Would you like to share something with us?
Yes, what I would like to say is that non-violence, maybe one should consider putting it on the school curriculum from primary school or preschool right up, where you teach the children, because one has to go to the root of some of the problems. You know, we are blaming the young people, but then some of them are not taught anything, maybe at their homes or something. And in the United States of America, there are some schools that have nonviolence on their school curriculum. Probably something we should probably think about and see whether it can work here, because we just cannot allow it to fester like that.
Yes, we certainly need to look at family life, but also our educators. How are we educating for peace, really? You know, one of the things that Pope Francis says in his message is he refers to his predecessor, Pope Benedict XVI, who said, for Christians, nonviolence is not merely a tactical behavior, but a person's way of being. But you can't have it as a way of your being unless it's been inculcated in you, unless it's been instilled in you, unless you know the difference between right and wrong. You know, we have, Catholics talk about a conscience formation, but we adults have to help form youngsters' consciences. Nadine?
And as you're speaking, I thought of 3 words: faith, hope, and love. And despite what is going on in the society in Trinidad or in the world globally, there's a lot of good out there. And I think we need to get young persons, to see that there's good out there despite what is going on around them. So it's very important for them to be hopeful that there's some hope, there's some promise, there's something better, I can improve, there's something out there for me. We have to encourage young persons to have self-confidence, to believe in themselves. And faith, in terms of no matter what's going on, that I will be okay, I will find a way to survive. And love, in terms of how we deal and how we treat with each other, is important for us to have a positive mindset. And I remember one of Michelle Obama's and her last message to persons is about young persons believing in themselves and knowing that you will do well, that you can achieve despite what. And I think many young persons, because of our culture, that if you don't achieve certain things at a certain time, that you are not good enough, you're not as good as somebody else. So I think that importance of a positive mindset, that people will feel that they will succeed at whatever they do eventually, whether they take a while, whether they do it immediately. I think it's very important for us to inculcate a positive mindset in young persons in particular.
The idea of hope is what the Pope is talking about. This whole nonviolence approach is a path to hope, as he says. We need to break for our video clip. Ready, set, green.
Hi, and we're just so happy to have you right here with us in Living Water Community, where we are going green. And this year we've taken on a new initiative to really try and save the environment one person at a time, one box at a time, one container at a time. Because what are we doing? We're really being very violent to the earth by throwing out those Styrotex containers and plastic containers, and it really is destroying the earth, and that's really being very disrespectful. So as a community, we are starting. Ready, set, green. We really want to invite you to try and partner with us in this. And how are we doing it? We have changed our containers. We used to use Styrotex, now we're using the biodegradable containers. Is it a challenge? Yes, it is a challenge. In a few ways. One, it's more costly. Two, the whole system has to adjust. You have to give people time to make those changes. And then, of course, when we come to the bins, we have different bins now. So there's a bin for plastics, there's a bin for the regular trash. And even that is a bit of a challenge because we're just so accustomed throwing it all in the bin, and now we have to separate it. So yes, there are challenges, but isn't it worth it in the end? By doing our little part to save the earth, that's what it's about. Pope Francis has been talking about Laudate Si, praise of God, praise of creation. And we want to be a part of that with him. We want to be a part of that with everyone. So this is not a Catholic thing, this is a people thing, to see how we can be non-violent. And people think violence is only about shooting or killing. No, It's about the way we speak. It's about the way we treat people. It's about the way we treat creation. So this is our little small part to start. And we're hoping it's not just our part, but it's something that so many others will join us with. As you see in our coffee shop, we have up the signs, Ready, Set, Green. We're going to be wearing uniforms, Ready, Set, Green. Now we're going to be helping you to save the environment in some way. And beyond these walls, what about in our homes? How many plastic containers do we get? How many Styrotex containers do we get? What do we do with them? Just throw them in the trash? Ooh, let's start thinking. Can we separate them and send them to places that can dispose of them in an appropriate way? You know, since we started doing this, just a couple of weeks ago, I had to go into a fast food restaurant and they were serving Styrotex containers. Immediately, I felt it. This isn't what I want. And I asked, can I get a plate? And they were very kind and they did that. It might have been a little challenging even for them, you know, to find a plate and not have to use the Styrotex, but it really is worth it. And if I'm aware of it, it means you can become aware of it. Then maybe your family can become aware of it. And then bit by bit, our whole country can become aware of it. And we can all do our part to save the world. So let's go. Ready, set, green.
Yes, and I hope we'll all be ready, set, and willing to take action immediately after this program to start thinking creatively. What is the one thing I can commit to in terms of being a peacemaker? And you know, the Pope rightly reminded us that Jesus himself offers a manual for the strategy of peacemaking in the Sermon on the Mount. The 8 Beatitudes, he said, provides a portrait of a person who we could describe as blessed, good, and authentic. Blessed are the meek, Jesus tells us, be the merciful and the peacemakers, those who are pure in heart, those who hunger and thirst for justice. So we have a manual. Are we people of the Beatitudes? And how this Sunday, I think the gospel is on the Beatitudes. How do we, as people of the Beatitudes, become peacemakers in our communities? Do you want to share, Terry?
Well, I think you know, the change starts with you. It's about what we as individuals do. I also say that actually the most important people in terms of initiating change are the people in positions of leadership. So because everybody's eyes are on them. So when people in leadership, I mean, you can start with the president, you can start with the prime minister, you can start with our parliamentarians, you can start with the principals of our schools. People are looking at them all the time, or police officers. They are looking at them for leadership. How they behave is how we will learn this is how you behave. If they see themselves as instruments of peace, so we talked about the very simple things like courtesy, starting with courtesy and respect for people and so on, how you speak to people. Our whole way of language, as I said, historically has been one of challenge and of violence almost and so on. If we change the way in which we speak to people, I think you start to get those changes. So I'm saying our leaders in the society have to be the ones who have to be the primary instruments of that, and the rest of us, I think, will then begin to follow.
Yes, we've got a caller. Good evening, caller.
Good evening, Ms. Ramdeen. First of all, do accept my condolences on your dad, and I'm so happy to see the courage you have to do the program tonight. So God bless you, and this topic is really very interesting. I came in late on it, but the little snippets I heard, very challenging for each and every one of us. So thanks for that. Keep up the good work. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Good night. Nicole, how can we actually take this idea, as Martin Luther King rightly said, peace is not merely a distant goal that we seek, but a means by which we arrive at that goal. We can't think long term about peace without believing that every step of the way we have to be peacemakers. It's part of the means, as he said, that we will arrive at that goal.
Yeah, I believe that peace or nonviolence is a way of being. It is how we live. It is, and I think as well, even though the leaders are very important, a lot of change in society comes from grassroots and the people on the ground and people like us saying, we will not accept this. And if we are living in our communities and there is a mother who is struggling to look after her children, we have to step out and help her. we have to give this support to people, and it is on a day-to-day basis. How are we interacting with our neighbors? How are we interacting with our children at school? I mean, I know people think that schools aren't doing a lot, but if all I had to do was to go in there and deliver a curriculum, that would be great.
Yeah.
But there are people, young people, they're hurting, they need support. They are very confused, they're exposed to lots of things with nobody having conversations with them, which I think is really important. If we don't have conversations about peace, nothing is going to come to those children. There's nothing they could understand. So it's really critical that we recognize our power as individuals to create this peace, because it becomes overwhelming. When you start to go bigger and bigger and bigger, we really have to start small and take that one step.
One step at a time.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
It's one step. It's one step. Instead of snapping at my daughter, if she comes to ask me something, it's breathing deeply and answering her quietly. Instead of taking the time to explain to your 3-year-old why they can't have something in the supermarket and setting some consequences, we would say, just hit her a slap now and she'll stop. That's how we would respond. One slap, and I don't have time for all of this. And those are the choices that we have to start changing.
Yes, for sure. Maybe.
And as you spoke of Martin Luther and Dr. Farrell spoke of Nelson Mandela, some things that came to mind are, one is patience. And the thing is, the Pope's message also spoke about, it doesn't mean being passive if you're, and these persons fought against very oppressive systems. But they had the foresight to know that, a deliberate action, nonviolent action, and patience, because we're in a society where we have to have everything now. Another critical part, I think, for two of them was self-love.
Yes.
And you know that you are valuable and you have to be treated with respect and courtesy.
Yeah.
So you understand that. So you love yourself. You're able to forgive yourself for the mistakes that you have made. And you also have patience with yourself and with others. I think that's important lessons.
Yes. Thanks. We've got another caller. Good evening, caller.
Good evening, Ms. Ramdeen.
Good evening. Yes, we're hearing you.
Yeah, good evening, Ms. Ramdeen, and to the panel.
Good evening.
I got into the program. Hello?
Yes, we're hearing you.
I got into the program a bit late, but I just was able in the last few minutes to get a bit of the snippets. And I get the gist of the conversation is the violence in the society. Am I correct?
Yes, we're talking about how we promote non-violence.
You're speaking about?
How are we going to promote non-violence as Pope Francis wants us to do?
Yeah, but let me point out to you, Ms. Ramdeen, and the rest of the panel, there are many contributing factors to the violence. And in my humble opinion, one of the main contributing factors to this steep increase in violence is our slow judicial process. You would agree with me?
Yes, to a certain
Your
extent.
deceased father, I believe you too yourself, is an attorney.
Yes.
And we learn the old English adage that justice delayed is justice denied.
Yes.
And we have a system in this country where people who are charged with offenses, they have to wait very unduly long periods before their matter is brought to court, and that has been very unfair to the accused person, because when a person is charged with an offense, whether a minor offense or a criminal offense, and he has to wait for 4 and 5 years, and in some instances as much as many as 10, 11, 12, 13 years, and languishing in detention before his matter is called to court. You cannot pronounce innocence or guilt. This charge is hanging over a person, and before his or her matter is called to court. Yeah. We had an instance just last week, I understand, reading the newspapers. Shannon, what was the young lady's name? Who was the bank employee?
Banfield.
I can't remember her surname. And when the matter was called for the accused person, I understand that certain documents were not passed from the police to the DPP's department. And it's just a stone's throw away. And I want to take to task the Chief Justice of this country, Mr. Ivor Archie. And it would seem to me that when he was appointed Chief Justice, I was under the impression that Mr. Ivor Archie would have been Chief Justice for Trinidad and Tobago. But I see he is going on international journeys all over the world at taxpayers' expense.
Yes, okay.
And your judiciary at home is in a total mess.
Can we don't want to attack individuals. We're talking about ideas that will help all of us. And I take your point about the judicial system. My article this weekend, which focuses on people of the Beatitudes, one of the things I talk about is the fact that we have what are the contributing factors to the violence. You're right. A slow judicial system, if we have dysfunctional institutions, as we know we do, and I'm sure the panelists would agree with me, a number of our major institutions in our country are dysfunctional, and we have to address those. But we won't focus on individuals. We know where these institutions are. For instance, in the magistrate court, we know the huge backlog. The justice, as you say, the latest justice denied. We need swift justice, but we have to have systems. Every one of us has a responsibility to put forward our ideas. And Sunday, the 29th of January, my article lists some of the ideas that will help us to move forward, to become a non-violent society, to help some of these failing institutions to address the issues that you and I and all of us are concerned about. Okay, do you wish to comment, any of you, on the whole idea of the wider issues that we need to look at if we're going to address non-violence?
Well, I think Nicole is right. I mean, the criminal justice system is broken.
Yes.
And he's also quite right to point out that there are a number of people who are languishing in the remand yard for 7, 8, 9, 10 years and so on. And that needs to be fixed. I think the new criminal procedure rules are now being discussed and so on after a long time.
But that won't address magistrate courts.
Well, hopefully we will get those matters out of the magistrates courts and so on into a process. So that those things need to be fixed. And you're quite right, we have institutions in society which are not functioning well, and we need to fix those because they are contributing to the violence that we see.
If you're out on bail and you have about 20 matters pending, and you know that your matter is going to perhaps not come up for another few years, perhaps some of these youngsters will think, well, I could take another chance. I could commit another crime. So as the head of the Caribbean Court of Justice rightly said, we are creating the environment in which crime is flourishing. So for 4 years I sat on the Police Service Commission. And, I will go to my grave with some of the horror stories. So we know our police service itself, as other institutions, need. They're all broken, many of them. And we can fix it. That's the thing. We've got some really bright people in Trinidad and Tobago, Nadine, come on. I mean, as our youngest person on CCSJ, you have so much to offer.
Because actually I was just thinking, those who we consider violent, how do we get to them, to save them? Is it possible? I mean, once there's life, there's hope. And I think that is something that we have to put our minds to, these young men who are taking up guns and attacking the society. How we have to find a way as a population to address that. And that is incumbent on the judicial system, our politicians, and the church. The church has a critical role to reaching these people.
As you mentioned, church, we're nearly out of time, so can we end with the peace prayer of St. Francis, so we can say it together? Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, joy. O Divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive, it is in pardoning that we are pardoned, and it is in dying that we are born to eternal life. Amen. So as we come to a close, I'd ask each of you for a simple comment about how we bring to life the Pope's peace message.
We need to change hearts.
Change
I
hearts.
think, yeah.
Goes right to the heart.
Goes right to the heart.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think we need to learn to love ourselves first, and then we can radiate that love outwards.
I would say have hope.
Hope. Yes, we are people of hope, not hopelessness. So consider seriously what we've discussed, read the Pope's peace message, and have a good evening. Thank you for viewing. See you next month.